I had a personal tragedy in my family. My mom died suddenly in June of that year. They took me offline for, 9 months or so. That put me into 2023.
Alana Sparrow is the Chief Branding Officer and co-founder at the Foundry for Art Design Culture.
Would you say that whether it's your strategy on LinkedIn is very different than on Instagram?
Yes.
What would you say first steps, strategies that founders, executives should take?
The very first thing that you need to hone in on with your personal brand is
you're an archaeologist, basically. You just kind of help figure out what it is that's hidden underneath all that.
Yeah, that's really all it is I'm just kind of, I'm helping them to uncover. And so when I say I don't build personal brands.
Welcome, Alana.
Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me, guys.
It's a pleasure after, just following your content, your unique style, which is very recognizable. It's just a pleasure to finally actually chat with you like this in this medium.
Pleasure's all mine. I'm happy to be here.
Can you share a personal experience where your personal brand significantly influenced your career and kind of how you got into this?
Yeah, so it's interesting how I kind of fumbled into the world of personal branding about a year ago. And I had been coming out of a series of catastrophes around our business. The pandemic, we were locked out of revenue for 2 years. 60% of our revenue was videography. And New York State was shut down because of the pandemic until March of 2022. Coming out of that, we're finally starting to see an uptick. I had a personal tragedy in my family. My mom died suddenly in June of that year. They took me offline for, 9 months or so. So come early, what would that put me into 2023? I have one shoe has dropped, the other shoe's dangling in terms of our business and where things were. And so I came to LinkedIn to reconnect with my business community and do a little research around employer branding, which was a core service offering that we had where we're a lot of videography work. And I was making a connection to executive personal brands in relationship to that. And as I dove deeper into it, I thought, why am I not doing this for myself in terms of just helping my business? And then I started doing more and more research on it. And then that's when I said, you know what? No, this is a core service offering. This is where it's at. There's a need. We can absolutely fill this void. But I need some social proof because while we have built business brands, I had never done it with a personal brand. And so I used myself as social proof. So that's really how my personal experience is that it has literally transformed our business by, getting very serious with my personal brand on that platform.
And actually, what's the name of the business that you're referring to from before?
The Foundry for Art Design and Culture. Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought. So the background was would you consider it a related field that you then pivoted over here? Would you say completely different skill sets that you had to really embrace?
No, I would say that it's really just a core service offering that gets delivered to individuals versus business brands. So the brand strategy that we apply to a business is the exact same framework strategy that we apply to a personal brand. So really the only difference is the customer.
Got it. Interesting. And have you seen an increase in people interested in personal branding as social media has grown? Or do you think it's relatively the same as it has before? You're just using different tools?
I think it's growing because awareness is growing, but I would say in terms of a service offering that's out in the world, we're still very much in an education of the marketplace mode. And because you've got some people who have been leveraging their personal brands on social for a number of years, but it's a very small percentage compared to all the people that could be leveraging their personal brands. It's very, very tiny. So I think we're still in an education of the marketplace. And, my audience is in the world of audiences is still relatively small. I've got just under 18,000 connections on LinkedIn. I have close to another 90,000 over on Instagram. But when you've got people out there that have millions of followers, hundreds of thousands of followers, it's still a relatively small audience.
Would you say that whether it's your strategy on LinkedIn is very different than on Instagram?
Yes. They're very different audiences, very different mindsets in terms of why they are on both of those platforms, where Instagram really started as an inspiration platform, and it very much still exists that way. People go there to see visual things, whether that's through still photos and now the video feed, but they go there for inspiration and to some degree entertainment. And on LinkedIn, it's very much about business connections, education, knowledge around their professions and their business. Even though Instagram can have some of that, they really are very different, and how you speak on the platform and how the content's delivered is very different, and interacted with even is different.
Can you unpack a bit how you would approach a post on LinkedIn versus Instagram?
On LinkedIn, the because of the way the post shows up in the feed and the way that it lays out, it's very different. And on Instagram, you can slide through your, let's say, on a carousel, where with LinkedIn, you're clicking on it if you're on your browser, and you can't interact on Instagram through a browser. That's really not how it's designed. It's on your phone, so it's a completely different experience. On Instagram, you're holding it, and people are touching your content and zooming in on your content. Where on LinkedIn, even though a lot of people are using LinkedIn on their phone, the user interface is just really quite different. And I think that on LinkedIn, for me, even though I have a lot of personal content there, my content on Instagram is far more personal. I get deeper into things, more intimate topics than I do on LinkedIn. Just because I don't think they're in the right frame of mind on LinkedIn. I've pushed the boundaries over there just to see how far I can take it. But I think, there's a time and place for everything. And I don't think just showing up just because I can, it's not, I'm not trying to get shock and awe. I'm just trying to bring issues to LinkedIn that I think are relevant for the workplace or being in business, right? Just being human in business.
Which I think is healthy for LinkedIn. And I think it's actually where I've seen more and more of LinkedIn, grow, mature, however you want to say, over the past even just year. I think it's interesting. And while video is still not as popular there as it is in others, you start to see that gain some popularity and stuff like that as well. But now it's funny. I feel like if we do a post that doesn't come with some sort of a personal photo or something like that, then it's actually gets less engagement, because people do tend to want a little bit more of that story and personal side, while still admitting that they're going there often for business and education too.
Well, yeah, because we want to be entertained when we're learning. So when we think about storytelling, what you're doing is you're delivering up different hormones. So there's the dopamine aspect, there's the cortisol, there's all these things that come through storytelling, and that's why people like it. That's why they're addicted to it, and then we're rewarding them with it, with elements of surprise to kind of keep them holding on. And that's whether people fully understand the psychology behind the stories that they're telling. I think that the jury's out on that. I'm trying to educate people on it and how to use it and how to use it effectively, and what storytelling actually means, to get people to buy in and feel connected to you.
That's great. Well, it's definitely working. Like I say, for your content we see on LinkedIn, it stands out in that way that it's refreshing. Like I appreciate it, I enjoy it, and no matter what social media on, it still does become a little bit about stopping the scroll to this degree. And I think again, your just unique style manages to do that. At least admitting, as it comes through my scroll, you stand out in a way that it feels like just something unique and different, which I think is healthy as people think about their own, personal brands and how to make sure they stop the scroll, for lack of a better way to put it.
When you told us the story about COVID and pandemic and your business and pivoting, it sounded like there definitely was a strategy, because you basically wanted yourself to be the social proof. And then there definitely is a strategy on your content. I mean, it's pretty obvious. You put a lot of thought into it. What would you say are first steps or strategies that founders or executives should take when they start to think about, I need to worry about my personal brand, or I need to think about building my personal brand? What should they do first?
The very first thing that you need to hone in on with your personal brand is why. Why are you doing it? Really, what is the why behind why you're doing it? And it really needs to go beyond, I want more sales, or I want talent. It really needs to be deeper than that, the bigger picture of why you do what it is that you do. Because when you understand the why, that's the thing that people buy into. People don't buy into the service. They buy, first, especially with a high touch service, like a brand strategist or a coach or whatever it is that you're doing, and why you're choosing to utilize a personal brand. You need to understand that core bit of why. Why am I doing what I'm doing, and why should people care? So that's the one thing I always have them hone in on first, and then where it is that they want to go. So what are the goals? What is it that they want to achieve by leveraging a personal brand, uncovering a personal brand, strategizing a personal brand? So what I boil it down to these three things is that a personal brand is taking you where you want to go, identifying who it is that you want to serve and what it is that you want to do, and putting strategy behind those three things. It's that basic. Whether it's, and that stands true even for a business brand. So we're applying those exact same principles to a personal brand. So really getting into the reason why, not just jumping on because you think that everybody's telling you that you need to have it and that you need to do it.
How do you get someone to be authentic in their answer to why versus surface level why, or a why that they think sounds good versus the true authentic why? How do you get into that?
Well, through my coursework, what I've overlaid into the brand strategy. So like the 6 main drivers of a brand, of any brand, right? Your mission, your vision, your purpose, your differentiators, your superpowers, all of that is the concept of ikigai. And I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's, the things that you do well, what the world needs, and all of that. And I poke holes. I challenge my clients on that, because if you don't fully understand the why, and if you give me in one of our strategy sessions, if you give me some BS reason why, or something that really doesn't hold up, I'm going to push that and I'm going to challenge it, because the reason why you want that is if you really want to be effective and if you want people to be a part of your ecosystem and to champion for you and to buy into what it is that you're doing, it needs to be believable. And when you're talking about a personal brand, especially to build out a business, it's a long haul to run a business. I mean, I've been in the industry for 35 years. I've owned a business for 25 years, this current one for 17. So for a very long time. And you have to be really passionate. You have to have a real clear understanding of, why am I doing this? What's this hustle all about? Like, beyond just the freedom, there's got to be more passion behind that, because that's really what people buy into.
I think it's one of those things where sometimes I think for some people, because the initial thing they think through is I want to make money, or I want this, or people have these aspirations of, millionaires, that lottery mentality of I want this. But I think, to your point, what I found at least is if people start diving deep enough, it's like, okay, well then what would you do with all of that money, or what would be your goals, or what thing would you want to be involved in? And then sometimes, at least for me personally, it's like you start realizing, well, here are the things I'd like to be more involved in. And sometimes people could turn their businesses into ways to be able to do that. Or it can be the core piece of how you want to help those other people succeed. But I do think that people struggle sometimes with that if it is money. So I'm just curious to go a little bit further in that and say, how do you get them there? If somebody's just like, no, I want to sell this, I want to have an exit with this business. How do you hone them in a little bit further to no, what is your why?
Yeah, I think that so far I have not had that challenge yet, because most of the people, I attract people who that's important to them. I help build 7-figure personal brands with purpose. So these are purpose-driven personal brands. That's what resonates to me, and that's what I want to build. So typically people aren't coming into me and just saying, no, I just want you to help me sell these widgets. That's not,
Got it.
Okay. There might be people out there to help them do that, but that's not going to be a real good alignment with me.
Right. No, that makes perfect sense.
When I've had conversation with former team members or clients and coaching clients, when we get into that non-business related why, and you ask the question, it always lands on an emotion. Like, I want to do this. And then, well, I wanted the car because I want, success. Oh, why do you think you want success? Well, I want success because of X. Eventually, it kind of boils down to, it makes me happy. It makes me proud. There's always an emotion attached to the end of that why. Is that what you find too, that usually ends up in an emotion?
Yeah, that most often why is about emotion. So for me, I have known since I was a late teen, early 20s, I've understood my why. I don't know that I had a framework that around it that said, oh, this is my why. But what has always driven me is to inspire and empower people. I was attracted to volunteering for that reason. I was attracted to teaching for that reason. And I've been attracted to bring people in to mentor. And I've been doing this for a long time without realizing that's the thing that always filled my cup, fed my soul. And that's usually what it boils down to is, whether when you say, oh, I started this company, sometimes it really is a superficial reason, but my goal is always to get around, like, why is it that, like, what brought you to this? There are pretty basic emotions that bring you to that. And, Simon Sinek has this really wonderful way to get you pretty quickly and to your why, is asking people really close to you, not spouses, not children or anything like that, really good friends. Why are you friends with me? Why do you want to spend time with me? What is that thing? And the one thing that always came up for me, I never asked my friends this, but the thing that my friends always have told me, even now to this day, new people I meet, is I love being around you because you inspire me. You empower me. And that's exciting. I love that the things that I'm doing are really, they're constantly feeding that thing that I'm so addicted to.
It's awesome.
Switching gears a little bit, what are some mistakes that you see people make when trying to start this journey of personal branding?
Well, the low-hanging fruit one is they go to, everybody just goes to colors and fonts, and they think that that's a personal brand, or they just start talking and posting. They're just throwing stuff out into the ethernet without an end goal or an audience even in mind. So I think those are the two main things that I see. They're starting at the end.
Right. And with that, I'm actually curious too, then would you recommend, if somebody was getting started, that they should start just to get started because maybe they're going to refine a little more of who they are? Or would you say, no, start with the framework so that you can make your brand a little bit more focused and people actually know what you stand for?
I think a lot of it does depend on the goals. So if you say to me, okay, I need this personal brand because it's very important for me to drive business, then I would say you absolutely need to pull it back, invest in the strategy, get really clear, because it's very difficult to reposition yourself. You're going to put in all this work then to try to build that trust, because that's what you're doing. If you're out there, you're social selling. I mean, especially if you're posting on a platform like LinkedIn, we're going to say that there's some sort of alignment between either your business or your career, one would think, if you're going to be investing in this time. And really, that's what it is on a platform like LinkedIn. It's social selling. So it's a form of advertising. So if you were a business and you're just lobbing stuff out there, thinking that it's going to get you customers or build trust in your brand or build authority in your brand, it's not going to do that. And so from a personal branding standpoint, I feel the same way about it. A lot of people have it, just toss it out there, just go. I would say that it comes with a certain amount of risk to do that. because you could be eroding trust and that sort of thing. And then now you've got to build back through that. So I think it really all depends on what's at stake and what the goal is.
That makes sense. And I guess back to where you were talking about the comparison to business brands, it's like, well, rarely would a business not have a strategy when they're starting something like that, because they're usually put an investment or something behind it. And maybe that disconnect sometimes with some personal brands, is that when people do start, so easy to just start, that sometimes that strategy is lacking. I'm curious for you, do you mainly focus on LinkedIn or Instagram for clients too, or do you also talk about, whether or not for them their personal brand is better off on something like, YouTube, for example, or TikTok?
Oh, absolutely. LinkedIn, Instagram, those are just channels. And where your brand should come to life is dependent on who it is that you're trying to reach and what your goals are. So whether, that if you're trying to do B2B, then it might make sense that LinkedIn is your platform. If you're trying to do B2B, but you're doing it for brands that live over on Instagram, there are a lot of people over there that have on Instagram that they're providing services. They could be female coaches. I see a lot of female brands over on Instagram, and maybe around fashion or interior design, things that are very visually oriented might exist on Instagram. I have clients who LinkedIn is just not a priority because they're looking for speaking engagements. They're writing books and, things of that nature. And they really don't want to invest in the social selling aspect that's required on LinkedIn, because it's a big dedication. You have to produce that content. You have to be there a lot. And other people they'll just pay to advertise versus the social selling aspect of it.
And do you usually tend to make recommendations on that based on their own personal engagement preferences, or?
So it always starts with what is your ultimate goal and where is your audience, and then the personal preference.
Okay, so regarding like if it's advertising versus if it's doing, their own reach out, if you will, that way, do you tend to see people lean one way or another based on those preferences?
Well, okay, so let's say if you're going to an advertising route at advertising your service, that's not about building a personal brand. That's just straight up advertising for your business. So that can be a goal. When you're talking about building your personal brand, that's building your authority through your own voice. And really that's going to come through sharing social content on a social media platform, which will be things like YouTube, TikTok, LinkedIn, Instagram. That's where those types of things will live typically, but it could be TED Talks. It could be out in real life. People have had personal brands and very strong personalities for a long time, long before this, whole notion of putting a wrapper on it.
A strategy that I've seen work over the years, and I would say that it's probably more apparent this year or recent years with the political environment, is people tend to be overly polarizing on social media. Would you say that's a good strategy? And if so, when should somebody deploy that strategy? Is it like when you get to Elon Musk status, then you can be polarizing, or should you be polarizing from the start?
So polarizing can be effective, but you really have to have the skin for it. And I think it needs to be a part of your personality. Being polarizing for the sake of being polarizing, I don't think is a strategy. And some personalities, that's just what they are. They live it, they breathe it. That's how they approach everything, every topic. And I think dragging politics into your brand, anything that is, whether it's politics or religion, any of these topics that can be challenging to have, you really need to be prepared to follow through, because on social, it can annihilate your brand for a very long time and maybe always. So it's not something I suggest going into lightly. And if you're going to take a stance on something that is a challenging or a sensitive topic, I see a lot of people, they don't really take much into consideration and the impact that it really could have. They don't really understand that the reverb that social has. You could put one little comment out there that you think is, oh, it's this benign thing that I commented under so-and-so's thing, and it's this one little thing. I've seen it absolutely tank individuals' lives. One comment. It's really all it takes. So,
and these days that comment could be from 10 years ago. That goes back up now, and it's back then it might have been okay. Yeah, it's like this really interesting balance when you see some of that as well. But I think even as art, and as you mentioned, Musk, just my thought on that is it's like, well, look, right now, though, Tesla sales are starting to drop in California, one of the biggest places where there were sales, as he starts, getting more political. So I think no matter the size, there's that potential for the ramification. Or in some cases, you've seen some people who've built these really strong brands because politics is their thing. They just know that at that point, what they're selling is usually around that specific audience. So I think that's where polarizing might make sense again, too, is if that's who you're trying to attract, then probably makes sense to be a bit more polarizing.
Ignore politics and religion. How do you know that your personal brand strategy is working? Like, are there metrics? Like, do you count followers and engagement? Like, what metrics would you pay attention to see if your personal brand is moving towards the direction that you want it to?
Right. Well, so you would set the goals of what it is that you want. And so for me, I have financial goals, obviously. I also have goals that are a bit more tangential, that sit outside of that help. They drive my strategy. They drive the type of content that I put out there. And then, of course, there are growth goals. And then you get to define success, too. So there are plenty of people out there that have very small followings on their social channels that make 7 and 8 figures. You don't need to have a giant following. It's not like there's this one magic formula, but it does become more challenging to sell to the same audience over and over and over again. So that's where growth and marketing, when it comes, especially if you're utilizing it for lead generation. Some people are not using it for lead generation. Some people just want to be authority around a particular topic. So for them, the audience growth will be much more important because it's more people hearing their voice and saying, yes, they are the authority, and they're being identified as, let's say, the world's leading authority or the industry's leading authority or whatever, whatever that is. And personal brands can be built for any number of things. Well, I've narrowed it down to 3 because a lot of things can be then put in underneath these 3 core things. So grow a business, advance a career, give voice to a cause. So when we think about grow a business, it's solopreneurs, founders, CEOs, whatever that is, global businesses. Advance a career, that's kind of a no-brainer. And then give voice to a cause can be nonprofits. It can be a one-off thing. It can be around, just any of these things that are more cause-driven and not necessarily related to a business.
Interesting, as you say in that second one about growing career, because I could see a time that the other ones may make sense. It's obviously, as you are looking specifically at, the grow the business side of it. For the career, at what point should somebody be actually thinking about how they leverage social media, personal branding in general? I just go to social media. I know there's other ways to look at it, but at what point? Because most people are looking at career advancement. It's an area where I help people, but there is that question: is that something people should consider right out of college about? Okay, here's what it is, or is it later on in their careers? When do you think personal branding for them really starts to matter? If we know their goal is career advancement.
At this point in time, now, even while you're in college, I mean, there are teens that have authority. There are 11-year-olds that have authority out there. So If you have something to say and you have the ability to put it forward in an articulate way, and you have goals or whatever that is, then you absolutely can leverage a personal brand to help you get there. But I would say that not everybody needs a personal brand. Like, there are people out there, like, everybody could use a personal brand. And I would say, no, I know lots of people out in real life that they don't need one. Their goals don't demand it. What they want out of life and what they're doing, a personal brand is not going to gain them really any benefit. When at least what we understand a personal brand being, meaning we're putting strategy behind it, we're showing up in places and that sort of thing. Like, when I think of the guy that, let's just say there's somebody, they're a waiter, and that's all they want to be, is a waiter. I want to be a waiter. I'm a career waiter.
Yeah.
I don't know that you need a personal brand out on social. Now, if you want to be a waiter that is known, that you want to have a book deal, you want, gigs, whatever, sponsorships, then yeah, you need a personal brand and social profile to help get you noticed.
It makes sense. So I think, would you tie that goal back to the overarching why, which then ignites the social media?
Yeah, I would. And there's definitely personal brands out there, profiles that have no why. People follow them for this energy that they have. They're following them for very different reasons. But when the work that I do, again, is more purpose-led, purpose-driven, I would love to see people have a lot more clarity on their why in life and the thing that drives them, because they're going to get so much more out of life. That's just a personal belief and philosophy that I have.
I wish in high school it was something they really got people to think about a little bit more, because oftentimes people are choosing careers before they actually understand what drives them personally. And maybe some people would argue and say, at that age, you don't really know everything you want. But I still think that concept, because for us, it wasn't until Simon Sinek and a few other things later on in life that you learn that you're like, it can help ignite just something else within us that I think makes life more enjoyable, for lack of a better way to put it.
And also, having your why is not necessarily about what you do, because while my why is to inspire and empower, I could do a lot of things to do that. There's a lot of activities that I could do to have that part of my soul fed. So it's less about the career and like what you're doing, but when they all align, and that's beautiful.
Well, and that's the alignment thing. And for me, it's how you approach. There's the story. I'm going to butcher this and probably mix a few up, but like, you hear about these people who had their lifelong careers as a janitor or as, a doorman somewhere else. And it's like, but for them, they saw their purpose each day, like the doorman, as making sure every person who came in or every person who left had a smile on their face. Like, they can go into this place for them. That's what they want to bring to people. And that's what made the job so enjoyable for them. And I'm sure there were, other things that, tips might have helped, on that one, but the janitor's not getting the tips. But the janitor in that case, like the way that they saw what they did and how that helped other people, I just think it can make for a lot more meaningful life. And then I do think that there is a connection to how that can help in somebody's overall career, because you are showing up with this different excitement for it instead of showing up for a paycheck, for lack of a better way to put it. But anyway, I digress. Yeah.
Going back to the waiter example, my personal opinion is that I think everybody should think about their personal brand, especially when I'm talking about everybody, employees. Because in this day and age of, there goes 10,000 people from Facebook, there goes 5,000. Like, the layoffs are so normal that just having a personal brand, it probably helps to come out of that layoff experience on top versus somebody that was silent. I'm just curious, what do you think about that as it relates to a personal brand?
Yeah, I think it depends on yes. So if you're employed, absolutely. When we say personal brand, that at a minimum have a polished LinkedIn profile. If that's where you're applying for jobs, it depends on where you are in I don't want to call it the food chain, but I'm going to call it that for the lack of because it's not, nothing better is coming to me. But where you are in that kind of hierarchy of the employed, but not all roles necessarily require you to be having content out there and being seen and that sort of thing. But if you have ambitions to grow through your industry, really advance your career, then there are ways that you can fast track that for yourself through your personal brand. You can actually build your value up to a current employer by positioning yourself out there and be seen in a way by your current employer that you might not otherwise have the opportunity to do. And so absolutely, if you are employed, I would say that, and want to remain employed, that leveraging a personal brand with some strategy behind it is highly beneficial.
So I guess a question I'd have there, though, is where is that divide? Because in that case, I know we're going down this rabbit hole of the waiter.
Yeah,
the waiter
okay.
has a network, can have a network. And if the waiter has a network, they can remain employed regardless of an online personal brand. So I think it probably depends on, I think there's this point where you want to attract people to you versus having to build your own network. So I'd be curious to just kind of go down that pathway a little bit more, that when you are working with people around building their personal brands, what does that typically mean for your clients?
For me, it is getting clear on their goals. Where do they, what are the goals? If you're building a personal brand and you feel like you want to invest.
And sorry, does it mean more like it is picking a social media that way, or does it mean the speaking, or does it mean, like, I know you mentioned it goals in the end, but for the typical person, when you're looking at that personal brand around, do you have like go-to channels that you're like, we need to pick your channel here that we want to do, or we need to pick these events because you're going to show up and that's where you're going to be? Or is it really down to each one's specific goals to choose how they will show up? Or is there always a go-to where you're like, no matter what, there's a social media that we have to look at for you, and then from there we branch out?
It will always start with goals. We're not going to pick any channel unless we know the goals. Yeah, because the goals and who it is that you need to be in front of. So to meet those goals, who is it that you need to interact with, that you're you want to bring into your ecosphere? And then we got to go where they are. And so that will dictate channel. And most often, a lot of times, social ends up being a part of this. If you really want to have heavy influence at this point, leveraging social can get you there much faster than, just out in your community at this point. So much has been pulled out of that in-person public action. Everybody is online. So it's very difficult to avoid social.
Yeah. Okay.
Relative to a personal brand and trying to meet goals.
I wanted to make sure we weren't blurring it with how we might think of the personal branding and social being such a key component, if there was much more to it and we were just oversimplifying it. So
yeah, I think that a lot of people think that when we say, okay, we're building a personal brand, well, we don't build a personal brand, because when you think that you're building a personal brand, that it's like, okay, I've got some plywood over here, and I got this concrete over here, and now we're going to build this thing. No, all we're doing is we're uncovering what this is, and we're putting strategy behind these things. It's already in you. These things are in you. So it's not an external thing that we're building. It's a thing that is already here, and we're reorganizing this so that it gets you where it is that you want to go. That's it.
Can you use a recent client and kind of walk us through, this was their goal, and then what did you do to help them in that trajectory?
I have 3 clients now that are kind of off and running their thing, and they have one has a creative service, 2 others are sort of advisors and coaches. And really for them, what it has done is just kind of cracked open it's the lead flow piece and building that authority and helping really just kind of reposition them. And one of my clients, which I'm most excited about, is that one thing for her is really wanting to build this more freedom around her life. And she's she's a stay-at-home mom because she works for herself, but she's not working for somebody else. But being able to get aligned with the types of organizations that she wanted to work with. And those were very purpose-driven organizations. And being very articulate in her personal brand is allowing her to pull more of those people into her stratosphere, because she can now, her language aligns with theirs and her message aligns with theirs. And so she's attracting more and more of those people into her client base. And that's really exciting. It's an exciting time for her.
With that, I'm actually curious, because is there the chance that sometimes somebody works to build their own personal brand, but in doing so, it might actually alienate them from their audience, because maybe their audience who's interested in their product before, but there's someone else. I don't mean polarizing in that way. I just mean, is there a chance just, a lot of marketing is leveraging the same language that your audience might use? Is there that risk that when somebody builds a personal brand, they show up as somebody different because you want to be your authentic self, but then at the same time, you might have leveraged a whole different marketing when you talk to that audience? Is there the potential for that collision?
Business brands have spent decades trying to personify themselves as human. That's why that's what we do. We give them brand archetypes and all of that because we want them to feel like certain types of people, right? That's why Jeep feels like the rugged outdoor guy, and Tiffany's is, the polished, demure, female, because we want them to feel like that. We want to attract people that are like that persona. Now, with personal brands, there's a bit of a meeting it's not really a meeting in the middle. It's truly showing up as yourself and attracting more like you, because you want to work with people that have shared values with you, that, they like your personality, that resonates, your tone of voice and all of that. You're showing up, and when you're showing up that way, you're going to repel. So your job with your personal brand and in your business brand is to attract and repel at the same time. You want to repel the people that don't align with your core values and that don't get your tone of voice, and that's okay. You're not meant to be there for everyone. And if you work with me on your personal brand, we're going to get you very clear on that. And I can tell you right now, every single one of the people that have gone through my personal brand program, when we've gone through the brand archetype piece of it, which is core to their identity, have always identified their primary one. They've identified it with how they think they need to be out in the world. They've identified it with the way that they have historically shown up, which hasn't really felt like them. And we've all done that. We've all shown up, and especially if you've got, kind of corralled into an industry, or early in life, you see it a lot in banking, finance, these people that are in these career paths where it's more conservative, they feel like they're not really showing up as themselves, that they've had to hold back. And so then now if they're going off into these coaching roles, or they're, starting their own business, they really just want to be able to show up as themselves. And I love that. And it's so uncovering a personal brand, going through that exercise is wildly cathartic for all of my clients, because it takes a lot of soul searching.
Yeah, interesting. And then when people go through that process, what does that look like when they're working with you?
My program right now, with my private clients, it's a very done with you, because it's a personal brand. So I'm not coming in and dictating and saying, okay, well, this is what your brand is.
You just helping uncover a bit.
Yeah. The answer, it's a series of very probing questions and things that they have to, they think about, and they put all this information in, and then they land on it. And then there's some challenging, and sometimes they get it right. When I say right, it's really more that I can see something in them that they don't always see, right? People will see us better than, because we think that we're fooling people, right? When we're putting something forward, but usually there's this underlying thing, or it's contradictions that show up. So that's what will happen, is there's a series of these questions that they have to answer. And then, but they answered this over here this way, but they answered the archetype thing over here and they don't line. So then that's when the challenge comes in, and that's when we unpack it and uncover it. And, spending time together helps unveil a lot of that too. It's not like I size somebody up the first time I get together.
Yeah. That's, I mean, and just hearing you say that, like, I admit, because for me, that is one thing I've always looked at, that contradiction that exists. And even, for me now, out of corporate America, it's like, there was a cleanse. I've gone through that. And like, oh, wait, here's who I am again. Because even though I had success there and I didn't feel like I was too far away from the nature of it still is people there. You can be somewhat chameleons when you're looking at advancement in the workplace and when you're trying to accomplish certain things in the workplace. People, it's just, you learn this way, you get rewarded for being this person, and then you get rewarded for being this person. And people, I think, lose track of that thing that you said is kind of at its heart. So I can understand how it could be cathartic as you go through and you like finally unleash who you are. So it sounds like you're an archaeologist basically with people. You just kind of help figure out what it is that's hidden underneath all that.
Yeah, that's really all it is I'm just kind of, I'm helping them to uncover. And so when I say I don't build personal brands, I help.
What advice would you have? Because sometimes this idea of all the work that has to go into this just feels overwhelming and just like, I forget it. But what advice would you have for people that want to go down this path, but feel like it will be overwhelming for them?
Yeah, I would say, just take it in chunks. Really, just take it in chunks. And I think it's focus in on why you feel like you need to do this. Why is it important? Where is it that you're trying to go with it? Identify that goal first. So it's so important, because if you're a business owner, is it because you're trying to bring more sales in? Or if you're an executive, it's because you're trying to attract talent into your team, in your career. If you're trying to build authority within your industry, having a goal in mind will be so important. And then you can kind of pull back into, when you start to ask that why. It's like, if you're in an industry, what makes you passionate about what it is that you do? Like, why did you get into this career? Why are you in this work? And what I've uncovered, actually, I've had a client who really, she took a pivot going through it. She was like, once she got into this exercise, she's like, no, that's not even what I want to do. Like, this is what I want to do. And I want more of this. And so that's really, it's the place to start. And I would say, don't rush it. There really is no rush. There is unless, like, you're saying, okay, mine was a little bit of a rush, because I got to this inflection point of my business where it was in trouble because of, remember, that whole series of things that were compounding, where I felt like I have to find a solution for my business. But for me, I was in this really fortunate, unfair advantage that I completely understood strategy. I completely understood the things that need to be in place in order for me to be able to do it. What I didn't understand was I didn't understand the LinkedIn platform and how to do that in a way that was going to be really effective. And I understood Instagram, I understood Facebook, and so I needed to collapse time. And that's why, I hired coaches to help me collapse time. And that's what coaches can do. That's what hiring a brand strategist can do, is it can help you collapse time. And if you are able to make that investment to get somebody to help you get from point A to point B faster, you can get that ROI back in that investment. And for me, it came back tenfold, because I was able to just get to business, get back to work really quickly, rather than trying to teach myself. So that's what you get. If you're going to do it yourself, it's going to take more time. If you pay somebody, you can collapse time.
And I'll add to that too and say, sometimes the benefit to paying somebody, not that they couldn't do this on their own, is your chances of executing, depending on what the program is, are a lot greater. Because I can tell you how many people I have who get stuck in this, and I've been there myself, in the, I've just got to figure this out. That, again, it could be back to the why or whatever it is, but that's just like a lifelong journey, because they don't actually ever really get to the bottom of it, because they lack that strategist sort of understanding to how you really get to it and can do it. And then you just end up action faking through things. and making bits and tiny bits of progress or reading another book, but don't actually get to it because once you get stuck, you give up or you start a new book instead of actually getting through it. So anyway.
Right. And that's the coaching aspect of what I do that gets people through that. And you're absolutely right. I have that around our sales strategy. I work with I have coaches. All coaches have coaches. Right? That's how we grow. And get advisement in our business because I could sit there and flounder. And what's that expression that when you over analysis paralysis, right? Because you just don't know, or you give up and you think, oh, this can't possibly work. It doesn't work if you have a failure.
And I think with that too, yeah, no, I'm guilty of that too. But I think you putting a few things together that you said too that I think a lot of people run into is I think the other reason why people spin their wheels a lot around some of this stuff and struggle is, again, they don't get quite far enough into it where they think they did. They feel good. They walk away with that temporary feeling of, haha, this is it. This is what I'm driven for. But I think, to your point, they didn't uncover it and go deep enough. They're still choosing what society wants for them or something else instead of actually back to the core of who they are. So then 1 year later, or heck, 1 month later, who am I kidding? They come back to it. So I think it's that thing of going deep enough to really uncover that is anyway, a huge kind of takeaway for me, just as I think about mistakes I think a lot of people make, and I know I have.
Well, and I look at personal branding in a very big way. I see it as something that has the potential to, this sounds insanely lofty, but I feel it has the potential to change the world and make the world truly better. And the reason for that is that what a personal brand can do is it can help people build businesses, build their livelihoods. It gives them that ability. It empowers them to do that. It gives them that traction. When you put voice to a cause, you can now speak on behalf of other people. And that's what a personal brand, like going through that exercise and putting strategy behind, helps you do. And so, with a personal brand, not only can you influence individuals, you can help communities, you can help cities, global causes, world. I mean, it's just, for me, I see it in just such a big way that I get really geeky about it.
But I love it. And what you just described, and it makes sense that you get geeky about it, is you want to inspire and empower others. And so you better get geeky around it, right? It shows how you've connected so deeply to that, which I love. And I think, again, just to see you light up around that, like, gosh, wouldn't it be great if everybody could light up around their own why? And obviously that's what you're trying to, help with as you make some of these connections too. So yeah, I love it. Get geeky. And I don't think it's lofty. And I'm on board.
Well, Alana, you mentioned LinkedIn and Instagram, but is there, and we'll link to those at the bottom of this episode, but anywhere else can people find you?
That's the only presence I have. Yeah, I'm hidden on Facebook.
Well, I mean, your presence on LinkedIn definitely is visible. So we'll point people there as for on Instagram.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity. It was great to get to know you guys.
You as well. Thank you.
Thank you.